We're speaking here with John Droppert from the industry analyst from Dairy Australia is with us. John, great to have you with us. We like to talk dairy when we can on Flow. Thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Great to be with you.
Give us a broad picture of just how the dairy industry in Australia is travelling at the moment.
Yeah, well, at the moment, farmers are enjoying quite a profitable year in terms of, the basic production margin. So very strong milk prices. Feed costs have been a real challenge, and fertiliser as well. So there's some real costs kind of barking at them from the bottom of the profit and loss statement. But really some outside complexity as well. So particularly, around securing labour, which is, a problem across the economy now. But, getting enough people to do the work on farm. You've also got some geopolitical uncertainty coming in as well. Obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has sort of set the cat amongst the pigeons globally in all manner of markets. And some of the key ones that impacts are, again, fertiliser, grain, oil seeds, which are all products that either are inputs to dairy farming, inputs to the inputs, fertiliser being used to, grow grain and so forth, or they compete, on the output side. So oil seeds, sunflower oil, is both a competitor, but also, has a place in infant formula and other foods as well. So, some really complex interactions there with what we're seeing in the world, in the global environment. And then finally, inflation at home. We haven't been talking about inflation much in Australia for the past decade or so, but now, prices in the supermarket are going up really quickly. So it's a good thing on one hand. It means, higher milk prices can be supported by higher prices on the shelf. But on the other hand, obviously, that puts consumers under pressure.
Yeah, there's a great number of topics you've raised there, many of which we've talked about in our regular commentary on agriculture. But at the supermarket level, I want to zero in on that. My mind goes back to the $1 a litre sort of milk price wars with the supermarkets. And, where are we at now with what people are paying at the supermarket, and how much are farmers actually getting directly as a benefit from those price increases?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the last few years we've seen significant increases at the farm gate. So I'll start with that. Milk prices, I think the last two seasons together have increased something like 35%. And at the supermarket level, we're talking about inflation in the region of 10 or 15%, I think, in total over that period as well. So farmers have actually, managed to capture a larger share if we're talking about that isolated period. But as you say, we went through 10 years where consumer prices didn't change effectively at all for liquid milk. And so, depending on where you take your starting point from, the overall situation is good or bad. But I think in terms of the last few years and the sort of trends we're seeing, we've seen farmers capturing a bigger share. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's that there's less milk in Australia. Our milk production has decreased in the last couple of years, and so there's some really significant competition at the farm gate to secure milk, whether it's for supermarket sales or for manufacturing into food service or for export.
Casting my mind back to in the past, farmers had to adjust to the consumer demand for permeate-free milk, and now we've got these lactose-free and other alternatives being required. How has that affected the individual farmer in terms of the offerings that need to be available at the supermarket?
From a farmer's perspective, I think they've ridden through that pretty well. There's obviously been things coming, alternatives such as, A2, which is, sold really strongly. Organic has been another one that, farmers, some farmers have moved into. And then, as you mentioned, some of the more complex products that have to be produced and some of the alternatives, the nut-based and so on and so forth. For farmers, a lot of that complexity, they don't have to deal with it. It's the food manufacturers and milk processors that are trying to, decide where to put their money and where to meet the market. Fortunately for farmers, it's not been an issue of, reduced demand for dairy either, because again, we've produced less milk and we actually, struggle to have enough to sell it in all the places where people want to buy it. So Australian farmers have come through that reasonably well. Now, from a manufacturing perspective, it is different. You've got this greater complexity. When you can't use permeate for something, you've got to use it for something else, or when you've got to supply these different variations, again, organic or A2, all that has to be separated and run through separate production lines at separate times and so on and so forth. So, the complexity we've seen, and we're just talking about white milk, right? Then you've got all your different flavoured milks that have come onto the market to try and increase the margin that's coming back through the industry as well. So, the level of product innovation, the level of complexity in the market is just staggering, the growth we've seen there. And some of that's a really good thing, but of course, makes life pretty challenging at times too.
Now, I just want to finish off talking about exports and imports. First of all, on the fresh milk front, Australia, I imagine we have to rely almost exclusively on fresh milk, or is we got some import competition coming in? And indeed, are we exporting some fresh milk in greater volumes?
Yeah, we certainly export, a lot more than what we import, even in terms of fresh milk. And in the sort of 5 years before COVID, there was some real push to develop fresh milk exports, into Southeast Asia, into China, and we saw some real momentum there. I think we export something like 250, 300 million litres of milk a year, so it's quite significant now, actually, as a share of of our exports, but even as our production. In terms of liquid milk, I don't have the exact figure, actually, how much we import. It's negligible. You can go to the supermarket. If you're so inclined, you could probably go to the supermarket and find a brand called Gold that's New Zealand milk that's imported. But it's, it'd be a fraction of the sales through supermarket channels. So you can find imported liquid milk if you go looking, but there'd be very little of it. And that's a UHT product, of course, because, the cost of bringing chilled milk over, even from New Zealand, makes it a bit of a pointless exercise.
Yeah, it's good news for the consumer who might not be savvy on this end that they can be rest assured that by and large all the milk they're buying at the supermarket is Australian milk. But there was huge demand out of China in particular for, I guess, the milk powder, people coming and buying it in supermarkets here, etc. How have we been going across the board with dairy on the export front?
Yeah, that was a really interesting period. I think, through 2014, 15 and that we saw, they'd bring out a pallet load of milk powder in, kilo bags, and it'd be in some supermarkets in cities in particular, and it'd be gone by the end of the day. That was, just almost a sort of period of, a mania sort of thing. And then that really came crashing down very quickly. Since then, things have sort of normalised a little bit, if you will. The Chinese market has, matured to the point where, there isn't the same sort of rush on milk powder. Now it's, we're seeing more demand for cheese and for other products as well. When it comes to infant formula, which was, another sort of rush really there, they've really tightened up on their requirements to try and, I guess, weed out some of the cowboys from that market. So it's, exporting infant formula even to China now is not just, it's not just a matter of getting some stuff, chucking in a tin and throwing it in a shipping container. It's, there's a lot involved. We've seen the product base has broadened. Australian product is still in demand, and been up to Japan since the sort of COVID restrictions lifted. And, again, their biggest complaint is that they can't get enough. They're really conscious of supply security. A lot of these, we're talking about customers that pay top dollar as well, but they've got to compete with the domestic market. They've got to compete with other export customers as well. So Australian dairy is in a really good place from a point of view of demand for the product. Of course, the challenge we have back home is supplying that product without taking it too far. You can't go and overpay at the farm gate. You get caught out. You can't have farmers can't go and expand if we've got all this geopolitical uncertainty, or if they can't get staff. So they face challenges as well. It's just a matter of all the parts of the supply chain kind of moving together and sending the right signals so that we can meet these opportunities without people taking unnecessary risks or finding themselves kind of, up the creek a bit later on.
Yeah, one of the flashpoints for geopolitical uncertainty has been Ukraine. Agriculture Minister Murray Watt in Europe at the moment, not only to speak with the EU, but also the UK about a free trade agreement. It seems sort of exciting to think that Australians might be sending cheese into parts of Europe where they pride themselves on what they produce. Do you see that as an exciting opportunity for the industry?
I think it's an opportunity, but it's not. We're not talking about pre kind of 1970s, butter for Britain sort of situation there. I think there's There's going to be minor opportunities there in terms of, minor in terms of volume, potentially some high value opportunities for Australian product to go into Europe or probably more so the UK. Obviously strong linkages between our two countries. But again, to come back to sort of, what I've been saying about volumes, and, we've got enough challenges kind of meeting the volume for dairy out of the markets we've been dealing with for, the last 40 or 50 years since Britain joined the European Common Market. And so it's kind of, there's opportunities there, but for milk processors, for example, for dairy manufacturers to take those, at the expense of supplying a customer that, they've been dealing with more recently. It's got to be a pretty attractive opportunity. You don't want to be burning the customer here to be chasing an opportunity down the track. I think that's actually something that caught a few people out in 2014-15, where they might have shorted customers in some markets to chase this the opportunities they saw in China, and of course that can come back to bite you down the track as well.
Yeah,
so huge opportunities, but certainly something again to be measured about.
Yeah, to sum that one up, we don't want to be robbing Pauls to pay Peter, to put it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, Paul might be the more attractive customer tomorrow, and he might remember that.
John Droppert, he's our industry analyst from Dairy Australia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries, pleasure.